Hello there, Commonwealth from Tears of the Kingdom got away with adding fewer new enemies by repurposing many of Breath of the Wild's and then using their parts valuable for fusing. It worked once, but the next Zelda game on the Switch 2 cannot pull the same card. It needs to deliver new and greater enemy variety on the menu. So be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell, and let's get straight into them. Ganondorf, through his stolen secret stone and his blood moon, was the source of the great demon army, summoning, commanding and riding with them into battle, bringing misery to everyone in their way.
The collection was definitely more advanced than in the past, with superior enemy AI and even personalities that added moments of surprise and entertainment. Bokoblins would hold conversations with each other, while the bigger moblins only waited for the moment the hero would show up so they could throw these noisy brats at him. Joking aside, there was definitely a focus on quality over quantity in the first two open-air Zeldas, which resulted in 10 different shades of the same enemy type, depending on the environment and how battle-hardened Link was. Either way, it's time to start cutting before adding. Since the Sheikah Guardians were gone in Tears, so will the Zonai Soldier constructs be in the next Zelda. At the same time, they never rivaled the Guardians, so they will not be nearly as missed as some of Ganon's servants. The same will also be the case with Gloom spawns, none more so than the greatly enjoyable Lionel duels, which we would hate to lose. Their iconic status only increased with the inclusion of Fuse and the Depths Coliseum in Tears of the Kingdom, though they are at risk if the next Zelda is to leave Hyrule for the first time in 3D since 2000's Majora's Mask. At the same time, they aren't an enemy exclusive to Hyrule, as they showed up in both 2001's Oracle of Ages and Seasons.
So what should the next Zelda do? First, replace all the minor new enemies added in Tears. Unlike the fantastic new overworld/sky/depths bosses like Gleeoks, Flux Constructs and even the Frogs, the Arrokudas, Horriblins, Little Frogs, yes, even the Gibdo did not match expectations. Once again, we need redeads with their iconic screams. Same with Floor Masters and Wall Masters, now that we have the likes back. Finally, the Arrokudas, as they were nowhere as good as the Arrowfos. In fact, we would prefer the Kargarok and even the Gwei over the one-hit Arrokudas. We know that the inclusion of more enemies was limited by the ability to fuse enemy horns to forge stronger weapons, or to simply fire off. Or in the case of Key's eyes, home in the enemy. But with Fuse likely gone, and possibly a new land, the Zelda team can play around like they did in Majora's Mask, since the a la carte enemy menu can be far more extensive. And this is where we can find greater variety of flying, land-based, underwater and darkness enemies. Leaving Hyrule might make the 3D comeback of Darknuts unlikely, but Iron Knuckles are close relatives and were found in Termina. Same goes with the Dancing Garrow or the Ball and Chain Trooper. Naturally, if we're not going back to Termina, but rather a brand new land, which we by the way are long overdue for, then we want to duel more Dark Knights, as Phantom Ganon in Tears was an interesting concept.
Especially if these powerful enemies would drop their battle axes and swords despite not offering any horns. With more useful enemy weapons apart from Lionel's, the lack of Fuse will not be as missed, in particular if we can get a new icon never seen before in the series. Let's return to vertical enemies, so hanging from above or flying on their own, since Aerolphos and Majora's Dragonfly are only two examples. There is room for more, as Harry Darlington demonstrated way back. We have already touched on his pose, which should have been more than a collectible or currency with the bargainers, but one thing I was missing in the caves and depths of Hyrule apart from the rats promised in 2019 were the Skulltulas. Yes, they can be really creepy, but also awesome to fight, as we saw in Twilight Princess Forest Temple. If only we could get the Queen Goma fight from the Wii U tech demo, though that was a boss and a matter for a different video. But since we're on the topic of Forest, Evermeans deserve another chance. But why not bring back Manhandlas, or at least the classic Deku Babas plus Dekus? The latter are overdue for a comeback, present in everything before the open era apart from the Wind Waker. More on stuff in other 3D Zelda and not in the Wind Waker and Breath and Tears soon. But first, the Peahats, back in Echoes of Wisdom in a grand style. Now they deserve to be found in 3D Zelda again.
Same goes for minor enemies unique to specific regions that could replace some of the 50 shades of Lizalfos. For instance, a new desert could bring back Skyward Sword's Arachna, and personally, I would also like to see snakes, or in Zelda terms ropes and classic levers added. In fact, Harry Darlington had a thing or two to say about region-exclusive enemies.
For Gerudo Desert, I was inspired by the scorpion-like Arachna, and for areas like Death Mountain, I thought it'd be fun to bring back the Tektites. In a game where vertical traversal is such a large part of the gameplay, having enemies like Tektites and Sculptula that can jump or climb after you would offer an extra level of challenge to exploring. Speaking of Death Mountain, we are still missing the classic foe of the Gorons, the Dodongos. I designed these creatures to be mounts for the Lizalfos. They would also be rideable, if only for a short while.
And guess what? The Dodongos are not exclusive to Hyrule in their so far appearances. One of them was in fact in Termina. Even so, open-air Hyrule has been limiting the true potential of greater enemy variety, and failed to provide unique enemies to each region. Well, there's no better chance to fix that than on the Nintendo Switch 2. For instance, Breath and Tears lacked interesting snow-based enemies. In most cases, they were just ice-based versions of existing creatures, like Keys, Lizalfos, and Octoroks. However, Yetis have appeared in Twilight Princess, and most recently, Echoes of Wisdom. For the most part, they have been kind creatures that aid Link and Zelda, but there's always the other side of the coin.
Given their beastly looks, it's a wonder why they haven't been enemies, just bosses in the snowy regions. Perhaps there could be two types of regular overworld Yeti, those who are peaceful and those who are not. The violent ones would be menacing foes of nature similar to Lynel's, only not as fast maybe. We are also missing the true white wolfos and their spear-throwing namesakes, the chill foes. Both made outdoor but more so indoor battles in Snow Peak Ruins iconic. Now as for the non-snowy mountain regions, there are already a multitude of rock enemies, so we don't need any more. But another thing comes to mind when we think of mountains, and that's climbing. Here we suggest enemies that are skilled in such a thing. We already have spiders, so how about something more unique, like the various species of mountain goats? Not literal goats, and we had Got the Goat in Majora's Mask. So a creature with climbing abilities could be interesting and make climbing a more hazardous sport than it already is. Those horns could do some serious damage. Breath and Tears welcomed us to the jungle, but lacked the fun in games, both in its dangerous wildlife and unique enemies to a rainforest. Instead, in Faron we saw a recycling of Lizalfos but electric chews, and forest Octoroks, in a biome where the enemy creature possibilities were endless.
Think snakes/ropes, but giant ones like anacondas, gorillas, and smaller baboons and other monkeys. Unless we get menacing crocodiles. While we're on the subject of water, and not just Tektites on the surface, let's finally go underneath it, as it is the final barrier for the open air to cross. By breaking this boundary, we have an entire current of new and returning enemies. Gjork Sharks, Shellblade, Electric Bari and Berry, you name it. Of course, the 3D Zelda team could get creative with brand new enemies based on the plethora of real-life sea creatures. Or they could take advantage of underwater horror with some truly monstrous creations. Think of the Leviathans that were just skeletons in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Even something like underwater redeads under the sea. Sunken pirate ships with pirate skeletons, full with treasure, but also dangers. There's quite literally an ocean of possibilities for enemies under the sea or even lakes.
The real challenge for the 3D Zelda team here would be to design an underwater combat system that's easy to control. There are always previous Zeldas to look back on, but given how much 3D Zelda has changed in the last decade, it's going to require some returning to the drawing board within weapons, which is a topic we will explore in a future episode. Now then, getting back to underwater enemies, Echoes of Wisdom showcased a variety of them, including bombfish, tanglers, and the mighty chomp fins, all of which are welcome to return in the next open-air Zelda game. Speaking of, Echoes had perhaps the most diverse lineup of enemies in any other Zelda entry, not just with the monsters themselves, but their weapons and movesets. Naturally, this is by design, as Zelda's only means of defense apart from the limited Sword Fighter Link form in this game were echoes of these enemies that fight for her. With each enemy having their own strengths, movesets, and weapons, this could be a significant hint as to how the next 3D Zelda game is handling enemies, especially knowing that Fuse will not be in the picture. Enemies may not have eye-popping features to fuse with Link's weapons upon being slain, but that doesn't mean the enemies can't be more interactive, like in Echoes of Wisdom.
While not literally using the Echo feature, perhaps Link could utilize multiple type of powers or tools to turn enemies against each other, like we saw with the model bot in Tears of the Kingdom. That one put enemies into a rage and caused them to attack their allies. Though, it could be even more intuitive than that. Imagine destroying a camp by fully taking control of a Moblin or even a Lynel in a group of Lynels. And then in classic Wind Waker Earth and Wind Temple style, control them, using their brute strength and large weapons to swipe bokoblins and the like away with ease. leaving Link to collect the spoils. Or perhaps you need air support and can control a flying enemy, dropping bombs on them similar to the beetle from Skyward Sword. As we said in the beginning, the enemies in Breath and Tears are impressively complex, but we should be able to take greater advantage of their strength by adding the advanced AI to a greater lineup of enemies in the next open-air game. The Zelda team at Nintendo needs only to look at what Grezzo did in Echoes of Wisdom, plus create some unique one-game foes like we saw with the Sheikah Guardians and Zonai constructs. We also wonder if the Yiga will see a replacement. So let us know in the comments your ideas for new and returning enemies in the next Zelda game. And if you haven't already, be sure to leave a like, subscribe and press the notification bell. Last but not least, a big thanks to you for watching and to all our patreon.com/commonrealm patrons. Special shoutouts go to Royal Producer, JC Funk and Heroes, Cheryl, Garrett Hoy, Holly Wolf and Kintaro. You all rock, and please enjoy one or both of these two awesome videos.